Section 45 of the Treasure Chest of My Book House. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Asterix. The Treasure Chest of My Book House, edited by Olive Beaupre Miller. Hiawatha's Fasting. A Legend of the First Indian Corn. Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. You shall hear how Hiawatha prayed and fasted in the forest, not for greater skill in hunting, not for greater craft in fishing, not for triumphs in the battle and renown among the warriors, but for profit of the people, for advantage of the nations. First he built a lodge for fasting, built a wigwam in the forest, by the shining Big Sea water. In the blithe and pleasant springtime, in the moon of leaves he built it, and with dreams and visions many, 7 whole days and nights he fasted. On the first day of his fasting, through the leafy woods he wandered, saw the deer start from the thicket, saw the rabbit in his burrow, heard the pheasant Benar drumming, heard the squirrel Adjidaumo rattling in his hoard of acorns, saw the pigeon the omeme building nests among the pine trees, and in flocks the wild goose Wawa flying to the fenlands northward, whirring, wailing far above him. "Master of life," he cried, desponding, "must our lives depend on these things?" On the next day of his fasting by the river's brink he wandered, through the muscadet, the meadow, saw the wild rice Manamoni, saw the blueberry Minaga, and the strawberry Odamin, and the grapevine, the bermargot, trailing o'er the alder branches, filling all the air with fragrance. "Master of life," he cried, desponding, "must our lives depend on these things?" On the third day of his fasting by the lake he sat and pondered, by the still transparent water, saw the sturgeon Nama leaping, scattering drops like beads of wampum, saw the yellow perch, the sawa, like a sunbeam in the water, saw the pike, the mascanoja, and the shoagashi, the crawfish. "Master of life," he cried, desponding, "must our lives depend on these things?" On the fourth day of his fasting, in his lodge he lay exhausted. From his couch of leaves and branches, gazing with half-open eyelids, full of shadowy dreams and visions, on the dizzy, swimming landscape, on the gleaming of the water, on the splendor of the sunset. And he saw a youth approaching, dressed in garments green and yellow, coming through the purple twilight, through the splendor of the sunset. Plumes of green bent o'er his forehead, and his hair was soft and golden. Standing at the open doorway, long he looked at Hiawatha, looked with pity and compassion on his wasted form and features, and in accents like the sighing of the south wind in the tree-tops, said he, "O my Hiawatha, all your prayers are heard in heaven, for you pray not like the others, not for greater skill in hunting, not for greater craft in fishing, not for triumph in the battle, nor renown among the warriors, but for profit of the people, for advantage of the nations. From the Master of Life descending, I, the friend of man, Monda'min, come to warn you and instruct you, how by struggle and by labor you shall gain what you have prayed for. Rise up from your bed of branches, rise, O youth, and wrestle with me." Faint with famine, Hiawatha started from his bed of branches, from the twilight of his wigwam, forth into the flush of sunset came and wrestled with Monda'min. At his touch he felt new courage, felt new life and hope and vigor run through every nerve and fiber. So they wrestled there together in the glory of the sunset, and the more they strove and struggled, stronger still grew Hiawatha, till the darkness fell around them, and the heron, the shushuga, from her nest among the pine trees, gave a cry of lamentation, gave a scream of pain and famine. "'Tis enough! then," said Monda'min, smiling upon Hiawatha. "But to morrow when the sun sets I will come again to try you." And he vanished and was seen not, whether sinking as the rain sinks, whether rising as the mists rise. Hiawatha saw not, knew not, only saw that he had vanished, leaving him alone and fainting, with the misty lake below him and the reeling stars above him. On the morrow and the next day, when the sun through heaven descending like a red and burning cinder from the heart of the Great Spirit fell into the western waters, came Monda'min for the trial, for the strife with Hiawatha, came as silent as the dew comes, from the empty air appearing, into empty air returning, taking shape when earth it touches, but invisible to all men in its coming and its going. Thrice they wrestled there together in the glory of the sunset, till the darkness fell around them, till the heron, the Shushugah, from her nest among the pine trees uttered her loud cry of famine, and Monda'min paused to listen. Tall and beautiful he stood there in his garments green and yellow. To and fro his plumes above him waved and nodded with his breathing, and the sweat of the encounter stood like drops of dew upon him, and he cried, "O Hiawatha, bravely have you wrestled with me, thrice have wrestled stoutly with me, and the Master of Life, who sees us, he will give to you the triumph." Then he smiled and said, "Tomorrow is the last day of your conflict, is the last day of your fasting. You will conquer and o'ercome me. Make a bed for me to lie in, where the rain may fall upon me, where the sun may come and warm me. Strip these garments green and yellow, strip this nodding plumage from me. Lay me in the earth and make it soft and loose and light above me. Let no hand disturb my slumber, let no weed nor worm molest me. Let not Kahgahgee, the raven, come to haunt me and molest me. Only come yourself to watch me, till I wake and start and quicken, till I leap into the sunshine." And thus saying he departed. Peacefully slept Hiawatha, but he heard the Wawanesa, heard the whippoorwill complaining, perched upon his lonely wigwam, heard the rushing Sebowisha, heard the rivulet rippling near him, talking to the darksome forest, heard the sighing of the branches as they lifted and subsided at the passing of the night wind, heard them as one hears in slumber far off murmurs, dreamy whispers. Peacefully slept Hiawatha. On the morrow came Nokomis, on the 7th day of his fasting, came with food for Hiawatha, came imploring and bewailing, lest his hunger should o'ercome him, lest his fasting should be fatal. But he tasted not and touched not, only said to her, "Nokomis, wait until the sun is setting, till the darkness falls around us, till the heron, the Shushugah, crying from the desolate marshes, tells us that the day is ended." Homeward weeping went Nokomis, sorrowing for her Hiawatha, fearing lest his strength should fail him, lest his fasting should be fatal. He meanwhile sat weary, waiting for the coming of Monda'min, till the shadows, pointing eastward, lengthened over field and forest, till the sun dropped from the heaven as a red leaf in the autumn falls and floats upon the water, falls and sinks into its bosom. And behold the young Monda'min, with his soft and shining tresses, with his garments green and yellow, with his long and glossy plumage, stood and beckoned at the doorway. And as one in slumber walking, pale and haggard but undaunted, from the wigwam Hiawatha came and wrestled with Monda'min. Round about him spun the landscape. Sky and forest reeled together, and his strong heart leaped within him, as the sturgeon leaps and struggles in a net to break its meshes. Like a ring of fire around him blazed and flared the red horizon, and 100 suns seemed looking at the combat of the wrestlers. Suddenly upon the green sward all alone stood Hiawatha, panting with his wild exertion, palpitating with the struggle, and before him, breathless, lifeless, lay the youth with hair disheveled, plumage torn and garments tattered. Dead he lay there in the sunset. And victorious Hiawatha made the grave as he commanded, stripped the garments from Monda'min, stripped his tattered plumage from him, laid him in the earth, and made it soft and loose and light above him. And the heron, the Shushugah, from the melancholy moorlands gave a cry of lamentation, gave a cry of pain and anguish. Homeward then went Hiawatha to the lodge of old Nokomis, and the 7 days of fasting were accomplished and completed, but the place was not forgotten where he wrestled with Monda'min, nor forgotten nor neglected was the grave where lay Monda'min, sleeping in the rain and sunshine, where his scattered plumes and garments faded in the rain and sunshine. Day by day did Hiawatha go to wait and watch beside it, kept the dark mold soft above it, kept it clean from weeds and insects, drove away with scoffs and shoutings Kagagi, the king of ravens, till at length a small green feather from the earth shot slowly upward, then another and another, and before the summer ended stood the maize in all its beauty, with its shining robes about it, and its long, soft, yellow tresses. And in rapture Hiawatha cried aloud, "It is Monda'min! Yes, the friend of man, Monda'min!" Then he called to old Nokomis and Iagoo, the great boaster, showed them where the maize was growing, told them of his wondrous vision, of his wrestling and his triumph, of this new gift to the nations, which should be their food forever. And still later, when the autumn changed the long green leaves to yellow, and the soft and juicy kernels grew like wampum, hard and yellow, then the ripened ears he gathered, stripped the withered husks from off them, as he once had stripped the wrestler, gave the first feast of Monda'min, and made known unto the people this new gift of the Great Spirit. End of section 45. Recording by Asterix.